I am doing great. Thanks for asking. It's a beautiful day. It's cold, but at least it's pretty looking out the window.
Yeah, that's for sure.
I think it was 29 taking the kids to school this morning. Ooh, I'm sure it's not warm down there either.
About the same. Or it
Yeah.
was.
All right. Hello, Janine. Hello, Ellen. Hello, April. Charles
Hi.
is joining us shortly. He's on the road.
Good morning.
He wanted to jump in. So today we're going to touch on working with investors for rental properties. And some of you have had some experience with this. Some of you maybe have talked to um, clients who are looking to do some investment but really haven't yet. So I just wanted to kind of open it by saying, that first time you get a call from someone who says, "Hey, I'm an investor," you're like, "All right." But after you talk to them for a while, your story could change depending on how serious they really are. So I want to, before I really get into anything too much, I wanted to just lean on the experience of some of the agents who have worked with, have a good amount of experience with investors. Janine, Charles, if you want to chime in a little bit about just kind of first things to look for and listen for, and maybe ask when you first engage with an investor. And then we can talk little bit more about maybe the process of helping pull and disseminate information for them. So let's start with kind of just your initial thoughts, Janine and Charles.
I haven't done a too.
I'm in
I
real
haven't done
quick because
too
I
much.
know. Wait, I don't know if you can hear me. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Cool.
Go ahead, Charles.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, the first question I always ask somebody when they're like, "Hey, I'm an investor looking for something," is, "Okay, great. How many houses have you bought so far?" Because I want to kind of get an idea of what their experience is, if this is their first time buying homes. And then the next question is, after they tell me that, is, do you want to use this for a rental or do you want to flip it?
Good question. And kind of why, Charles, are you asking that question about how many have you bought so far? Delve into that a little bit more.
Yeah, because sometimes it's about setting good expectations. Sometimes people there about it, and people get these ideas about what they can. Sometimes it's just a good idea to make sure you understand where they're coming from.
I think that he's breaking up a little bit, but hopefully you guys are kind of gathering on that. Where are they coming from? What's their thought process on this? Why are they getting into investing? I know Charles has had this happen to him, and I have too. You get somebody who has attended one of these flipping seminars or one of these, you know, buy a house not using your money and flip it, and, there's no risk and everything. And people don't know what they're doing. They will get in over their head, and or they'll waste a lot of your time. Another caveat to think about, Janine, why don't you give us
Yeah.
one with investors?
Point to that.
I haven't.
I wanted to do yesterday, whereas I was saying, okay, what you need to do is take $5,000, go out and buy a quadplex unit with an FHA loan for $100,000, live in one of the units, and rent the other three.
Yeah.
Commenting on it like, "Oh, this is such a great idea." Oh, yeah, I might be a bit. You might not be able to hear me.
Okay. Janine, go ahead.
I haven't had a ton of experience working with investors per se. The area where we serve is very common to work with people that want to buy properties to rent out, especially to the military. So, one of my first questions is, like Charles said, have you done this before? Yes or no? Why do you want to do this? And I kind of lead with saying, if you're planning on renting this out, we're not property management firm. We can connect you with somebody that can help you do that unless you're going to manage it by yourself. I try to stay out of their numbers and everything, because that's going to look different to all people. Are they lending? Are they buying with cash? What is the interest rate? They need to understand that if they're buying with a loan, that an investment loan is structured much differently than a primary property. You're going to have a higher down payment. You're going to have a higher interest rate. Also, the homeowner's insurance, you have to buy a landlord policy. So there's a lot of different things that go into the numbers. And so they really need to be prepared for what all of that entails. And they need to talk with their lender to make sure that they understand, you know, kind of like what's the max purchase that I can get. And what I always try to do is, if there's not a tenant in the property, try to run the rental comps for the area of the property or the neighborhood that they're trying to rent, so they can get an idea of what to expect and what's realistic. The last one I did was a second property with my guy. It actually came with the tenant in it. So that was kind of a slam dunk for him. And he understood that he probably wasn't going to make money right away. It was probably going to take him a couple of years because of interest rates, but he understands that in Sneads Ferry, he's never going to have a vacant townhouse here because of the military. So that, and this is a friend of mine that's divorced and out of the Marine Corps and sitting on a ton of money that he just doesn't know what to do with. So he's trying to be, you know, put it in places where it makes the most sense for him. But again, I haven't done a ton of investment property for people. I've got some friends right now that are trying to expand their portfolio that to pay for college for kids down the road, which is, you know, smart. But again, it's all about the numbers making sense for them and making sure that they understand, is it a good time? Are we looking at this long term? Is this, you know, it really just location. So, I mean, there's a lot of factors that go into that. I've got one client right now that she says it's not her first investment property, but it's very, very difficult right now because it's a very low budget and it's just, things are tight. And I don't know if it's smart for her to be doing this right now, but again, it's not my decision. It's not my money. We do what we're told to do. We give them the data, they make the decisions and go from there. So I am also not going to be running my ass all around town, driving 30 minutes here, 30 minutes there for stuff that doesn't make sense. So it's important that these clients that may have a lower budget understand what the numbers look like before you go down the rabbit hole with them trying to make this work.
All of those are great points.
I got a question. You mentioned running comps. How would you do that for those short-term?
Instead of when you're in the MLS, instead of clicking on residential, you just do the drop down that says residential / long-term. And you can just do it by neighborhood. You can do it by city. Same thing, same as you would run a comp for a resale house. You just change the thing to residential long-term, and it'll show up now that's only rentals that would have been in the MLS. That doesn't have any rentals that maybe were like a for sale by owner person or somebody that, you know, rented it out themselves. You only have, and that's why I tell them, I was like, listen, here's what I've got access via the MLS. That's the only rental information that I can give you. I don't know. I don't have access to anything else. But yeah, you just run the rental comps like you would a regular CMA.
We don't have short-term rental info that we could
do
use?
not have that. You're going to have to contact a
rental property management company.
Now,
yeah.
Most of the time we're focused on short-term rentals on the beach. So you can contact Topsail Realty, which does those on the beach. And they're great to work with because they don't work with buyers and sellers. So they're not going to take our clients. They only do property management. So call over there. There's a contact on our resources page. Call over there and connect with them so they know who you are. And then if you get somebody looking at the beach, you can send them an address and they'll run a rental projection for you to share with your folks. Also, you want to ask if it's something that's currently a short-term rental, if there aren't docs in the MLS, which sometimes there aren't, which is a poor way of listing a property that uses a short-term rental, is ask the agent who the property manager is and get the short-term rental information. Find out what their bookings have looked like the last few years, or what their gross has been. Find out how much it's booked, you know, for the coming year to give you an idea, not only of what what weeks are booked because the buyer might want to use this fund, but also most income this year that's already booked, right?
Yep. I would say too, if you've got a property that like if it's up for sale that they're buying that has been a rental in the past or has a current tenant with the lease up, always ask that listing agent, hey, what is the current tenant paying for rent? Or that, because that can say, okay, hey buyer, this is what they're getting for rent right now. This is probably a good gauge for you to run some numbers, and obviously the markets change and people can always increase rent or whatnot, but always try to, it should be listed, especially if there's a tenant in the property, they should be able to give you that current rental information of what they're making. But if you guys ever have clients that purchase and then want a property management, there's a lady that I know, her name is Tammy. I actually had some buyers that needed a rental. She will not take our business. She strictly will just help our people manage their property, and she'll pay a referral fee to us for referring them to her. So if you have somebody that needs property management, like not on the island, in the mainland, like in the
We
Hampstead,
know
Sneeds
people
Ferry.
everywhere. Just ask
Yep.
the team if you've got somebody looking
Yep.
for a recommendation for a management company. The
Yep.
thing is, also for properties that are currently occupied, most investors really like the idea of buying something that's already occupied and has a lease. That way there's no downtime and they don't have to go find a tenant. So it's not going to be vacant for a month or two, right? The thing is, and again, a lot of times that lease information isn't in MLS. So make sure you request it and find out, get an actual copy of the lease. If you can't do that before you show it, at least find out what the rental income is, because it might not be worth showing. There might be 8 months left on the lease and the lease is $1,200, but it needs to cash flow $1,700 to make sense with a 20% deposit. And those are the kind of things that you're going to want to figure out for your client, what they need. I'll give you an example. My client, who I just got under contract for another investment property, is the fourth one I've done for him. He basically said, this is what I need to cash flow a month. So I'm looking at these different properties in these different areas. Which one do you think could cash flow that? And we ended up, I ran the rental comps, which you can do long-term rental comps in MLS, and pull it and send it to them so that they can see what comparable properties, just like buying and selling, are renting for on a monthly basis. Now, typically when you do rental comps, you're going to want to go back a year and not just 6 months or 90 days like we often do for buying and selling, because there's not going to be as much of a picture and you need to see it. Also, to Janine's point, all the rentals aren't in MLS. So you're not working with a huge or with all the data like we, or at least like 99% of the data like we're working with when we run comps for buying and selling. So you need to be aware of that as well.
And for the most part, these investors know what the hell they're doing and what they need and what their numbers look like. And I try to stay out of their number situation because if they've done this before, they know what they're looking for. They know when they're ready to pull the trigger. They know what makes sense. They're hooked up with a lender that they have worked with before, that they pretty much know what they're doing. And we're here to open the doors and help them get the contract, help them get the property. But yeah, if there's anything that, anything extra that we can do to help them, for sure. And some of these investors, y'all gotta be careful, because some of them just want a deal. And those are not the people that I care to work with. They're not investors to me. They're just wasting my time.
That's for sure. And that's one thing I wanted to really kind of caveat with that. Hey, I've got an investor client. Great. They want to buy 4 properties over the next 2 years. Okay, that's great. But are they realistic and understand that the market is going to dictate what things are going to sell for?
That's right.
Or are they looking for a deal and going to run the ring wagon and throw low ball after low ball after low ball and just waste your time for a $150,000 or $200,000 investment property? So let's
be very mindful. Yep.
So I think this is a good time too to talk about the investor perspective, April and her husband own a few investment properties. April, I'd love for you to speak kind of about this process, and I know you've represented yourself basically, but maybe speak about this process from an investment or investor perspective to help us fill in the blanks that we might be missing from that perspective. You're on mute.
Hi.
Hey.
Okay. Hey, so yeah, Matt is always looking for stuff and more so than I am. And he knows, just like Janine said, the numbers exactly, where he needs to be as far as if it's going to be cash, if he's going to get a lender involved. So as far as that goes, when an investor's looking at property, like Janine said again, like they know their numbers. So and especially right now with the rates being a little higher, it would definitely have to be a deal, but obviously they're still out there. But, either you're an investor or you're not, and they're always looking and they're always, wanting information. So I would have to say, if you do have somebody like that and you see something that comes up, send it, or text them or something. So if they're like my husband, they'll usually respond pretty quickly. And it doesn't have to be what they're used to. They could be all over the place. I mean, we have an RV, we have a beach house, we have condos. So you just never know.
That's a really good point, April. And for the agent perspective on here, I'll say, know who your investor clients are and always be on the lookout for solid options for them. You'll have a lot more success, and you'll also gain their trust for repeat business if you're putting good opportunities in front of them, even if they aren't ready to make a decision now. I mean, my last guy, I hadn't talked to him in a couple of months, and just out of the blue, he was like, "Hey, here's 4 houses. Which one of these should I buy?" When you get to that level of service with someone, that's great, because that might bring you an extra transaction or 2 a year. He also sent his dad to me a couple of months ago. That was the last time I interacted with him, because his dad had some money he had to stash somewhere. A lot of these folks aren't putting money in the market. They're putting it in real estate, because there are a lot of, options that help them offset a lot of other things by putting it in real estate instead of putting it in the market. To April's point also, I believe that the real investors, the real savvy investors, are always looking, even when they're not looking, whether they're ready now or not. They're always monitoring the market. They know what their plan is, whether they're ready now or next month, and they know their numbers. The real investors do. Now, that doesn't mean don't work with people who want to buy an investment property for the first time, because those people started out with the first investment property, right? And if you're the first one, well, then you can gain, all of that future business, hopefully, if you do the right job. So, there's a dance there. But just like when working with buyers, it's the same thing. You got to set the right expectations. And you need to set the expectations for the amount of showings you're going to do, when you're going to do showings. We're not going to do 5 one-off showings if all those properties are available. We'll knock them out, and then we'll go from there. Be careful with virtual investors. No one will waste your time like a virtual client because they don't have to go anywhere.
Yeah.
They're sitting at work on their phone watching you walk through a house after you've driven 45 minutes one way. So make sure that you're careful about setting those expectations and boundaries, just like you would for any client. To Janine's point, don't get too involved in their numbers. Get them the data that they can plug it into whatever they use to calculate what they need to do. Right?
Yep. I will say I learned something last year. Sold a house to a guy, first time home buyer, came back, said, this was last year. 2 years ago, I sold him his house for him and his family. Then he came back and he said, I want to buy a house for my mom. She's going to pay me rent. Well, he had just bought a house. He was having a hard time getting qualified because of DTI. And a lot of the times it was just tough. But his previous lender gave him, which I didn't know was a thing. There's a loan out there, family loan, where you can buy for like elderly family members. And so we were able to get him qualified on that loan where we purchased the house. And then it was like a couple months, he fixed it up or whatever. And then she moved in September, and she's paying him the rent for that. So it was an investment, but it wasn't like your typical investment loan. It was a loan that I had never heard of. And so we closed on that house last year. And then he texted me when I gave him his Christmas present. He was like, get ready, 24, we're getting our third one with you. So it's really good to just stay in front of those people, and they'll reach out when they're ready. I don't know what he wants now, because that one was specifically for his mom and it needed to be in Jacksonville and whatever. But again, you learn something new. I didn't know that that was even a thing, and it's a thing. So
That's a good point too. There are a lot of different ways to structure things like that. So it's always good to be aware of those things. Also, not that you have to get too into it, but learn a little bit about what a 1031 is, because a lot of folks will use these tools to sell a property and then buy a property to avoid taxes, right? So make sure you look a little into that. There should be a contact on our resources page for a 1031 attorney that one of our attorneys put us in contact with, because if someone's doing a 1031 exchange, they need a specialist to help walk through that with them. You also have to disclose that as part of the offer, right? As part of the financing piece of it on that page there, you'll say other in 1031 exchange. So be aware of that, and plan accordingly so you're not completely blindsided. I would also say always keep a search active for them. Maybe you don't have it set to daily or instantly like you do for your hot clients. Maybe you just do it weekly, something like that. But keep something active to keep things in front of them, unless they say, hey, I'm not interested now, or I'm done, or whatever.
one more thing, y'all, keep your network going. I closed 2 deals just on referrals last year for one of Andrew's coworkers who's an investor. Actually, I closed one with Brand. I referred him to an agent in Charlotte. He bought 2 investment properties with her. I referred him to Brandon. Brandon closed on his house that he had. Brandon listed it and sold it. So keep your network out there for if you have investors that may not want to be here, but anywhere else, you can still get referrals on investors. It's just the same.
Yeah, my guy said he had made an offer on a property in Texas and it didn't work out. And I was like, well, who was your agent down there? Did you know him before? How did you find him? I'll tell you how I originally connected with this guy. A lender introduced him to me. Now it is what it is. What else? Who's got something else to ask or add?
I got a quick question. In terms of rental comps in MLS, sometimes it can be a little bit rough. I think you had mentioned this earlier, finding comps sometimes. Right? The data set there is kind of sparse at times. So are there any other options out there for assessing what current rents are going for a particular type of house or a particular size of house?
Sure. I mean, there are websites like, I think, rental.com or rentals.com that list properties for rent that aren't in MLS. You can go and do research on those sites and see what things are listed for. You can check Craigslist and see what things are listed for. There are other resources out there that you can look to see for actual properties. I'm not talking about apartments, which is what most of those are for, but condos, townhomes, single family residences that are for sale. You might, does Zillow do rentals? I think maybe.
Zillow. Yeah. I look at Zillow. That the investor y'all had sent me. I was looking at Zillow for some rents, but I just wasn't sure, like, in terms of, obviously those are places that are on the market to rent, and there's a price that's been established, right? And I imagine that there's some basis for that price. Wasn't sure if that's maybe a good tack to take, or if that's just throwing things to the wind.
The only thing about those are we only see what they're listed for. We don't know what they ultimately rent for.
Yep.
So we're limited to that degree, but it is some knowledge that we can take versus just guessing. So maybe we've got some closed data, and closed meaning rented data in MLS that we can pull from. And then we've also got some currently listed properties in Zillow or elsewhere that we can pull from to kind of mash together and come up with this kind of Frankenstein of rental comps, right? To share with them.
That's a
Okay.
great point that you just made, Doug. Like my guy that I sold him a townhouse a couple of years ago. I sold it to him, and I actually had a buyer that couldn't buy, and I was like, hey, these might be good tenants, and he screened them, background them, dumped them in. They've been in. They just moved out, and he needed to put a new tenant in there. So he was like, can you run me some comps? So I was like, oh, dude, there's like 3 listed on the street for rent right now. You know, you got a little bit of competition here, because he wanted to raise his rent. So he went on military relocate. So he was very smart about, okay, I can't raise it too much, because I've got 3 here that are still sitting on the street at X price that haven't rented. So I can't, if I don't want to have a vacancy, I can't be too dumb with it. So he went on so I just sent him what was like the closed and what was on the street, because obviously it's been 2 years since he's had this tenant in there, and he put it on military relocator. I think he raised it like $100, got somebody in 24 hours and moved him in January 1st. So he had no vacancy. So that was a helpful tool that he had to be smart about, not going nuts. But then he was like, well, shit, I got her in 24 hours. I could have probably gotten another $100 out of her. But I mean, you can only use what you've got, but you have to be mindful too, like the market shifting, and people's rents are going up, and it's expensive out there. So they got to keep that in mind right now. I mean, I just sold him another property. It was 8.25% interest with a 4,000 buy down. So interest rates are not cheap for investors right now.
Yeah, I mean, if you think rates are high for primary, then look at what investment properties are. But hey, if you get somebody who's a cash buyer, then super duper. We don't have to worry
Let's
about
go.
things like that. We don't have to worry about an appraisal. They might want one, all of those things, etc. Shoot, the other thing I was going to say, if it's occupied and there's a lease in place, find out if it's, I mentioned getting the details, of course, but make sure you know what the terms are so you can share with them. When's the lease expiration date? A lot of properties that I've looked at for investors in the past, after that initial year, they'll go to a month to month with the tenant. So what you could also do if your client is interested in is negotiate them out or negotiate an extension as part of the offer to purchase. Hey, are the tenants willing to extend the lease? Are they willing to sign up the lease for the remainder of the year? Now, sometimes your client might want them out because they want to go in there, spruce it up, and jack up the rent a couple $100. Other times, your folks just don't want any lapse in people in there, and they just want to keep it rolling, and they don't care. I'll deal with it whenever down the road. I'm not interested in putting any more money into it right now. So make sure that you have that conversation, and talk through those things, talk through those options, make sure you understand what your investor's thinking. Have they even thought about those things, etc.
Are there extra steps that you have to take if you have somebody purchasing a rental property that already has a tenant in it? You just have to go over the
Oh, yes. I just did that.
Okay.
Yeah. You have to click the box. So this tenant was in it for like 6 more months, I think. And you have an additional provisions addendum. You get a copy of the lease. You have to check, like they have to be able to review everything. The security deposit, the pet deposit get transferred to the new owner at closing. Like it's a whole thing.
Well, I've seen the little box where it says like is subjected to lease on the.
Yeah.
I figured there was something for that, but. And how do you handle? Go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, it was a different question.
No, I was just going to say, you have to make sure, like, is your is your buyer wanting to take on the current tenant? Yes or no? Like if there's 6 months left in the lease and it's up for sale, obviously that seller wants to sell with the current tenant in place. You're not gonna be able to do a 6 month close. So they just have to make sure that the current rent makes sense for their purchase.
Okay. How do you
Uh,
handle it when they ask like like I just got off the phone with a guy who's wanting to purchase a vacation rental, but just in long-term or vacation, when they say like, how is the market for rentals there? Are people still renting? I feel like they're still renting. But is there like
Are you
a way to,
talking about like beach property? So what, the way that I try, that's a very common question. Here in Onslow County, there's always a market for rental. There's always a demographic for military community that aren't going to be here long enough where it's going to make sense for them to purchase a home or aren't in a position to be able to purchase a home. So, you know, in the Onslow County area, I feel like you're always going to have potential for renters. And of course, if you buy a beach property, who doesn't rent out at the beach? You know, so that anywhere else that I'm not super familiar with, I just I
Right.
can't answer that. Yeah.
Another couple points I made, and I'm typing all this out, so I've got a sheet to recap like I usually do that I'll share with you guys. But how much is the security deposit? Who's holding it?
Yep.
You know, what are the terms of the property management agreement?
Yep.
Typically, a new owner doesn't have to honor the agreement for management with the previous company because that was signed by the seller, right? But you want to see the lease and make sure there's not something in there that says otherwise. Also, sometimes they definitely want to use the property management company because it's going to make it easier on them. But sometimes they don't because they want to manage it themselves because, you know, they'll save 15 or 20% or whatever they're charging, right? So you want to make sure that you get them that information so they can talk to the company and disseminate. Now, I'm not going to get in the middle of that. I'm not going to run back and forth between the property management company and my client and get those questions answered, but I will make sure that I facilitate my client getting that information so they can get their own questions answered, talk to them, basically interview them and see if they want to use them or not. Does that make sense? Also, when I
Yep.
learned this the hard way, make sure that the attorney knows that it's leased and that there's rent month to month, and the attorney knows how much it is so they can give your client their prorated share from a credit from the seller at closing. Because the property management company ain't going to do that.
Okay.
Questions?
No, that's great. When you first get started in it, it can be a little bit of a headache. And there are some agents that just do investment and only work with investors, you know, sometimes it's their cup of tea. So you really gotta, you know, it may not be a great fit for everybody, but it's good for repeat business, in my opinion.
That can help you grow a portfolio of investors
Mm-hmm.
that will come back to you to help, you know, guarantee a couple of deals every year. This is what I would say. At the end of the day, every buyer's an investor. People just invest in things different
That's
ways.
fair.
You know, a primary residence is an investment. A short-term rental property is investment. A long-term rental property is an investment. Everything is an investment, really, at the end of the day. So just remembering that and remembering that our approach really isn't that different, but there are some other additional things that you're going to look out for versus if it's somebody buying for a primary residence. Make sense?
do you run into a lot of HOAs or anything that don't allow you to have rentals in the neighborhood?
Yeah, you definitely need to be aware of that with properties. That's an excellent question, Connor. You want to check. One way to do that is to check MLS and see if anything else in there has rented. Because if you do a comp search and you don't see, and this, I'm talking like a condo or a townhouse community, or maybe even you know like a big single family residence community. If you look and you don't see rental comps in there, make sure you double check the covenants, double check them always. Also ask the agent, are you aware if there's any rental restrictions in here? The flip side of that is some places only allow so many investors to buy in a place, especially new construction communities. They'll put a cap on non-occupied owners. So you want to make sure that you're aware of that and you check on that. That's a great question.
For investors, like I know when you purchase a house and it's your primary residence, you have like 60 days.
To take
Yeah.
occupancy.
Yeah,
Yes.
isn't that different for, okay.
Yes,
different.
correct. It's different.
Perfect.
Mhm. Because they know, and their loan is structured as an investment loan, they know that they're not going to be occupying the property. And when they get the deed, like if an investor owns the property already, if there's an investor seller that's selling it, the deed will say grantor is not primary residence or whatever. But yeah, the loan is structured so that they know that. So there's no
Okay.
mortgage fraud. Yeah. And I do know, like, if they're buying as a second home, that's a little bit different as an investment loan. I
Yes.
think that you have to be able to allow, I don't know what the time period is, a certain amount of time to occupy it yourself versus an investment property. So it can't be like a 12-month lease or whatever. I'm not 100% sure on all that, but I know that if they're buying as a second home, it's structured differently than an investment loan as well, and the rules might be a little bit different too. So have them talk to the lender about whether they should purchase it as a second home or an investment property, because some people want to buy a beach house where they only want to rent it out for part of the year and use it for themselves. Then that's going to probably be a second home mortgage instead of a investment property mortgage. So
That's
the
a good
lender will
point,
be
because
very,
that's how
very
we
helpful.
bought our properties, as second home, because we do short-term rentals, not long-term
There
rentals.
you go. And you have to be careful too, because a lot of HOAs won't allow short-term rentals, only long-term rentals. So if your people are trying to Airbnb, that limits opportunities too. So just be very mindful. Like for Chadwick Shores and Sneeds Ferry, I had a listing and the agent was like, hey, I have people that want to put an offer on this house, but can you confirm they can do Airbnb? Called the HOA director. She's like, absolutely, they can do Airbnb. So you really need to make sure that the neighborhoods with HOAs will or will not allow short-term rentals in there.
So Chadwick Shores allow short-term rentals.
Yes.
Not like. All right, cool.
What about land investors? How much should I be putting into like their ideal use? I have some folks that want to buy a parcel of land down here and we put a mobile home on it at some point. And if we're looking at one town or one county, pretty straightforward. If we're looking at a broader set of towns, municipalities, that becomes kind of a trudge to call or email each planning
100%.
department and understand what the restrictions are. So I'm curious what y'all's take are on the land and then helping out with their potential use or ideal use for that land.
So I would say, depending on where they want to be, you set your search for that. If they're wanting, let's say they want to do like, I don't know, tiny home or whatever the hell, I'm sending them something with no HOA, because no HOA is going to allow that. You have to have a conversation with them out the gate. Like, okay, if you plan on doing X, that's going to limit your options, because most places per zoning won't allow that to happen. Like in a community, you can't have manufactured home and mobile home with single family home. If it's a non-HOA, they probably have a lot more leniency, or if it's somewhere super rural and a lot of land with, they can do whatever the hell. So I always have that conversation like, okay, I totally understand your intent for this property. That might limit your options based on, the zoning restrictions. And that's the number one thing that we're going to have to follow. I can send them information all day long, but I'm not driving 2 hours for a $50,000 piece of land. I'm just not doing it. That's not how I'm going to defer them to somebody that's a better resource in that area, or the listing agent that will be able to help them better. But it can get kind of tricky. So you got to kind of just gather the information that you can that's available, send it to them, and then it may be a hit, it may be a miss.
Yeah, I find that I tend to scrutinize things when I'm providing them a property, like I'll see something like, oh, this
Yeah,
looks like it
exactly.
fits their needs,
Right.
and then I'll spend the time vetting it.
Yeah.
But when they're sending me things, I'll then go ahead and that prompts me to look at it. So I
Yeah.
just don't know, the kind of like when
It
I
just
need to cut
depends
it
really,
off.
like you said, what they want to do and how serious they are. Understand too that if they're not buying land with cash, they have to go through a bank because local lenders are not going to lend on land. So, and your down payment for land is going to be significantly higher,
Mhm.
usually in the, Doug, correct me if I'm wrong, 20
Yeah.
to 25% maybe. Which I've sold a ton of land, but usually it's in a community where then they're building a house on it with a builder and I connect them with the builder. So
Yeah.
that's different. But if somebody's just looking to like put their RV on it and just needs sewer and water hookup, that's different.
Yeah, we
Yeah,
had to put
Eli.
down 25,
Yeah, okay.
25%.
There you go. Yeah.
Also, Eli, for some of these land things, like I'll share with you what it says in MLS, but I'm going to encourage you to take the onus off yourself for additional information and suggest your clients contact the municipality
Yes.
directly to get the answer.
Okay.
Yes.
You know,
Yes. Great.
Yeah.
Yes. Or
I
do a
like that approach.
drive-by. Have them do a drive-by, Eli.
oh yeah, definitely before meeting anybody to see land, I'd say go do a drive-by if they're in the area. I've certainly done that. I'm not going to meet you out there the first time. If you go by and you like it and you want some more information, then I'll meet you out there and we can
Yep.
walk around
Yep.
once we get
Okay.
all the questions answered. But yeah,
Yeah.
for that stuff, for zoning stuff or permitting stuff or what's allowed or not, definitely use the municipality as a resource and explain it to them that you're actually doing them a favor. You
That's
don't
right.
want to get it wrong. I don't want
Mhm.
to
That's right.
misrepresent what your actual plan is. So
right.
contact them directly and make sure that they get the answers that they're looking for before you move forward with something.
That's right.
Cool.
Yep.
I like that approach, and that'll save me a hell of a lot of time. So I found that the planning folks at most municipalities, the majority actually, are really friendly,
Very
and they
helpful.
will
Very good.
they'll
Yeah.
talk your ear off talking
Yeah.
zoning and planning.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
good stuff.
The good thing about
Yeah.
it, and a good rule of thumb usually to use is if it's not an incorporated area, then you're probably going to be free to do, they're going to be free to do a lot.
Whatever.
The chances
Yeah.
are a lot higher. If it's in
Yeah.
city limits, yeah, probably not, especially if it's in
Yeah.
an HOA. So you can
Yeah.
kind of use those as a rule of thumb, I think.
Yeah,
Not
it gets pretty
not 100%,
hairy.
but
It gets pretty hairy down around Apex, Holly Springs, Fuquay. Like Holly Springs, they do not want manufactured homes, and so they've made it pretty stringent to put one. You have to have it on a just in case
I-
anyone endeavors on this, it has to be on an acre of land plus, and it has to have had a manufactured home previously on it. So
only grandfathered in. Huh? Interesting.
Yep.
Okay. Well, we're nearing the end of our hour. Does anyone have any other questions or thoughts or comments they'd like to drop in the group? Eli, I saw your chat comment. Anything in particular? I mean, I know how Brandon works with his investment. I think we probably covered most of what he would say. Was there anything in particular, a question or anything you had about the deal?
No, just was looking for a panel.
He had a doctor's appointment. Sophie had a checkup this morning, so he couldn't be here.
All good.
All right. Well, if nobody else has anything, go ahead. Go ahead.
Off topic, but back to the questions I was asking earlier about short-term rentals not being in the MLS for us to kind of, work up those comps. Another thing, not in the MLS for sale by owners. Again, unrelated topic, but how do I want to look at all those? I want to see all these. How do I do that other than
Well, they're not
driving
all-
around and saying, where the
They're
heck
not
are
all
these?
necessarily
Here's one.
clear. I mean, you can search for them on Zillow, but that's about the only place that they're listed.
Me
and
too.
that's
Yep.
Yeah.
Put
That's
them
where I
on
go.
there. So if you're looking for that, if you're having a hard time finding something for your client, yeah, go in there and set up your search and change it from agent listed to listed by other. That's pretty much how you find the FSBOs. But that's it, because I'm not aware of any other place that they're listed.
That's how I've sold all mine, Doug.
Craigslist,
Yep.
Facebook Marketplace, maybe something like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
That's it.
What do you think is the percentage of those homes out there for sale by owner that are actually on Zillow? I mean, how many more
I've
do you
sold,
think?
I've sold, what, 5, Doug? For sale by owner off of Zillow? A bunch.
So I mean, I think in this day and time, for sale by owner is obviously not, I don't think a great idea for a lot of reasons. If those people hadn't even figured out how to put it online, I'm not sure I want to interact with them.
Yep.
Good point.
I'm
When the
just saying.
market was really, really hard and my people were having a very difficult time winning houses back in 21, 22,
Mhm.
I was going on for sale by owner and
Mhm.
getting them homes that way. And unfortunately, it worked out a couple times. And half the times, honestly, the buyers will come to me and be like, hey, I was driving around, saw the sign in the yard, and they'll
Yep.
send me a picture of it. And
Right.
shit's not anywhere online. So I just call the person and look it up on the GIS or whatever. But
Right, right.
it's a little bit more tricky to navigate for sale by owner, and they can be exhausting if you
Yeah.
go down the
I-
rabbit hole
I-
with that. And a lot of sellers are the more sellers are more often difficult than
Yeah.
not difficult and for sale
Yeah.
by owner.
Yeah, not something I want to seek out, but I did notice there were in my area a good few of them. And I was just thinking,
Yeah.
oh, it's right here. It's kind of just sitting there. You know, sometimes it's this teeny little sign that you have to be at the right angle to even see.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's a land or even a forgotten home. But yeah, I was just wondering because I didn't know where I could go if there was a place where you could see all that. But thank you.
Yep.
Yep.
Certainly. All right. Well, I hope this was helpful for everybody to give you a little bit more insight on working with investors, some things to make sure that you get out in front of, some initial questions you want to make sure you answer so you're in the position to really help them move in the right direction and accomplish their goals. And also at the same time, and not for nothing, because I'm always looking out for you guys, I don't want you running around like a chicken with your head cut off or wasting a lot of time with people who don't have serious expectations or serious
That's
goals
right.
about what's going
Mhm.
on in the
Yep.
market. Right.
Hey,
So
Doug, I think this was
always
great.
will
And I
preach
think
to look
it's,
out for yourself.
Doug, I think this was great. And it's that these are lessons learned and great reminders of what we bring to residential as well.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Just
100%.
regular, stay in our lane, right? Don't
That's right.
answer questions we're not supposed, we can't tell someone what they can afford for a house.
That's
These
right.
investors need to figure out it on their own.
I
what
might
they
think
can
that you're making a shit decision, but that's not my call. You know, that's your
Exactly.
money, your investment. If that's what you want to buy and that's what you want to do, I'll sell the fucking house. You know, like
Do your thing,
Absolutely.
make you happy, help your client accomplish what their goals are. They're their goals, right?
that's right. That's right. Not ours.
We provide the information, they make a decision
They
based
make the
on the
decision.
information that we help them understand, and that's it.
And we don't have to agree with it.
Thanks for adding that, Ellen. I think that's a good point. None of this is really that far from what we do all day, every day. It's just a little tweaked because we want to tailor the process to the
Mhm.
specific thing that we're looking at, right?
Oh,
Right.
Doug,
Yes.
I was talking to a client yesterday and he's thinking about, and it's funny that we had this meeting about this. He's thinking about using this property as an investment home. It is in Surf City, so I did send you the comps on it. So I just wanted you to review it and because it might be something that he might need to utilize as a second home instead of investment. So I just wanted you to kind of take a look at it and see what you think as well.
Sure. I'm happy to look at comps, but the second home versus investment thing is going to be a conversation between him and
Yeah,
his,
with the
Lender.
lender. Yeah.
but yeah, I'll take a look at it. All
Okay,
right, guys. Have a great day.
All right,
Bye,
Call if you
y'all.
need anything. Bye.
See ya.
All
Bye.
right.